Hi, everybody. I wanted to talk to you today share with you. I started reading this book by Joe Biden. It's called Promise Me, Dad. A Year of Hope, Hardship, and Purpose. I'm going to talk to you about chapter one. But before I do that, please make sure you put a like on the video if you like the content, subscribe to the channel, and also leave me a message. The first chapter is called Biden Family Thanksgiving. I'm going to go through and read a couple of things that I underlined in this chapter. Here's some things he said. He says, my working life in Washington had given me a sense of pride and accomplishment from the day I arrived, and that feeling had not dimmed after almost 42 years. The truth was, on November 25th, 2014, I was as excited and energized by my work as I had been at any time in my career, though my current office was, it must be admitted, a truly odd job. He says there is a strange and singularly elasticity to the responsibilities of a vice president. As a strictly constitutional matter, the holder of the office has very little power. He or she is charged with breaking a tie vote in the Senate, which I had not been called to do in nearly 6 years, and waiting around to take over if the president is somehow disabled. He says Barack Obama had handed me big things to run from the beginning of our first term, and once he assigned me to oversee the Recovery Act of 2009, or budget negotiations with Senator Mitch McConnell, or diplomatic relations with Iraq, he did not look over my shoulder. I believe I did my job well enough to earn and keep his trust. So that's part of the chapter, but the big thing in this chapter is he was talking about how his family started a tradition in Nantucket of having a Thanksgiving celebration. So I'm going to read a little bit of this to you and also directly out of the book, and I'm also going to read some things I underlined. He says, the Biden tradition of Thanksgiving on Nantucket started as an act of diplomacy back in 1975. I was a first-term senator and a single father of 2 boys. Bo was 6 years old and Hunter just 5. And Jill Jacobs and I had started to talk seriously about our future together. Thanksgiving was the first holiday for Jill and me together, and we had too many invitations. My parents wanted us to spend the day with them in Wilmington. Jill's parents wanted us in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. The parents of my first wife, who had died along with my baby daughter in a car accident a few years earlier, wanted us to bring their grandsons to upstate New York and spend the long weekend with them. No matter which family we chose, we were going to hurt somebody's feelings, which was the last thing either Jill or I wanted to do. I was in my Senate office one day that fall, explaining this predicament to my chief of staff, and he said, what you need is a nuclear Thanksgiving, meaning the nuclear family alone. Only Wes Bartholom's was a Boston guy who said what he actually was nuclear Thanksgiving. I wasn't sure what he was trying to say until he explained it might be easiest on everybody if the 4 of us, me and Jill, Bo and Hunt, went away alone. He suggested the island of Nantucket, which was an hour by ferry south of Cape Cod. Neither Jill nor I had ever been there, but we decided to go ahead and make an adventure of it. So they got this suggestion to go to Nantucket for Thanksgiving because they had all these family members who were asking them to come and spend Thanksgiving with them. He goes on to say Nantucket turned out to be worth it once we finally got there, 8 hours after we left our house in Wilmington. He says they had Thanksgiving dinner that year at a place called Coffin House, a 130-year-old inn built back when Nantucket was a commercial center of the whaling industry. And then we stayed around afterward to sit by the fireplace and play checkers. That next day we had lunch at a restaurant called the Brotherhood of Thieves, went to the little movie house in town, tossed a football on the beach, and drove back into town to watch the annual lighting of the Christmas tree. We took scouting drives around the island, and whereas we passed a radio transmission tower with a big red light on top, I'd warned the boys to go to the back seat so the red-eye monster couldn't see them. He says, after this Thanksgiving, Jill and I got married a year and a half later, and our daughter Ashley was born 4 years after that. He says, and every year, even as the family grew, they went back to Nantucket for Thanksgiving. The little trip in the Wagoneer grew into a caravan of 2 or 3 cars, so the whole family started to go there for Thanksgiving. He says, we had some great years in that span, and we had some lousy years, but whatever was happening, whatever bumps and bruises we were suffering, we put it all aside and we celebrated Thanksgiving in Nantucket. The holiday trip was a constant in our grandchildren's lives from the time they were aware, and they made it clear how much it meant to them. He says the frolics and habits of our earliest visits grew into immutable family traditions. Shopping downtown, lunch at the Brotherhood, the trips to the beach with football in hand. We went back to that little salt box every year to get the family photo under the carved Forever Wild sign. Those pictures became a marker of our family progress. He says the great thing that always happened out of this Nantucket Thanksgiving was the Christmas list. Everybody would give Jill, his wife, their Christmas list. He says children and grown-ups alike had to present to her their Christmas list, maximum 10 items and minimum 10 items. He says one thing that changed when he became vice president is that they no longer drove there. They had to take Air Force 2, which was kind of a disappointment at first, but they realized what they had to do. So once again, and then this chapter was about how they started the Biden tradition of Thanksgiving in Nantucket. At the end of this chapter, he talked about how, like his son Bo was starting to go through some health things with his health. And at the end of the chapter, he says, I pulled out my diary and started to write. I did have one big item for my own Christmas list that year, but I was keeping it to myself. Nav Obbs, November 30, 2014, 7:30 p.m., just home from Nantucket. I pray we have one more year together in 2015. Bo. So he was praying that he was going to get to have another year with his son in 2015. So once again, this is chapter 1. This is kind of like a summary of that chapter. This is a book by Joe Biden called Promise Me, Dad. If you like the video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a message. Thank you.